Thank you, Matthias. Thank you, Maxon. I'm very happy to be here. My name is Arturo Wong. I am a senior motion designer here in Los Angeles, California. Now working for over 10 years, over a decade. I'm getting old. Um, I started in the industry as a character animator back in the days, back in 2008. I wanted to become a rigger and animator, working exclusively with Maya and 3D Studio Max. And then upon graduation, I started to receive all these different requests of my friends, of just clients in general, asking me to create logos, asking me to create intro animations, transitions. And I was like, I do character animation, that's just what I want to stick to. But eventually I ended up saying yes to my friends, yes to my clients. And I started to discover that like doing all these animations in Maya was, very difficult to do, especially the ones where you had to control, 1,000 cloners or like 100 cloners or whatever, like there's these different tools in Cinema 4D that like it just makes your life easier. And at a time working with Maya, it didn't make sense for me to learn another software. At the end of the day, I spent 4 years just trying to learn one single software. Um, but yeah, that was the time that I decided to transition into Cinema 4D. I started to watch some tutorials from Grayscale Gorilla on YouTube, as well as like going into like Google and try to find anything that can get me started, with Cinema 4D. And for that, at least the community for Cinema 4D, it's always been great. It's always been welcoming. It's always been there to give you assets, to give you all these little tips to get you going. And that's something that, at least for me, it's always been, I've always been grateful for. And since then, I never look back. I continue my career as a motion designer, um, just utilizing Cinema 4D, as well as After Effects, Photoshop, Substance Painter. Once upon a time, I will come back to Maya to complement certain areas for animation and to cinema, as well as Houdini sometimes. I'm still learning Houdini. It's a beast, but it's always good to have it. But yeah, those are my weapons of choice. Throughout the years, I've had the opportunity to work for the Miami Dolphins, Miami Heat, CBS, ESPN, doing rebranding packages, doing graphic packages. Like the latest one that I did was for the NFL, which in a minute I will share a small video. It's a video. It's a compilation of projects that I've done for the past couple of years, um, as well as I've done some live events, motion projection mapping stuff that I've done for like art events back in Miami. But yeah, I've been really grateful since I became a motion designer. The opportunities that I encountered, they just literally multiply, and I've always been grateful for that. So without further ado, let me show you my demo reel. This small, I shouldn't call it demo reel, but it's a small compilation of videos that I just gathered to show you guys what I do. So. And that was it. I hope you guys liked it. Like I said, it was just a small compilation of videos, projects that I've done in the past couple of years. But without further ado, let's go ahead and jump into my presentation for today. We have 3 projects that I want to discuss, and there we go. Here are the 3 projects that I want to be that I'm going to be talking about. The first one, it's this Mograph effect, sort of like a Mograph reveal effect that I created using only cloners and fields and like effectors. We're going to be baking it in and as an Alembic, bringing it back, adding more detail. Moving on to our second project, I'm going to be talking about Espresso and a little bit of Morph Tag, how to set up this, what Morph Tag does, and how we can set up this animation in an automated way so that you don't have to worry about, if your client asks you, hey, can we expand this to 20 seconds, a minute, an hour? You don't have to worry about that because you didn't create any keyframes in the first place. It's all being driven by expressions or like noise or time notes. Moving to our last project, we're going to be discussing a little bit of Redshift. I want to share with you my workflow, how I set up these materials, how I utilize vertex maps in order for me to mix different materials together, how to create custom AOVs, and ultimately how to bring those AOVs into After Effects in order for us to composite them together. And that's going to be our presentation for today. So without further ado, let's jump ahead for our first project. Let me show you the final render so that we can get started. So for our first project, we have this 3D build-up effect that I created using Mograph. The reason why I wanted to do it with Mograph and cloners and not do it with simulations was to just have that versatility, that ability to art direct this without having to do multiple simulations and having to wait for them. I kind of wanted to have a setup or a system that will allow me to like art direct this in real time. This was created with effectors and one field that was controlling the overall effect. It's a very simple setup. So let's go into Cinema 4D and let's get started. Let me show you how easy this is. So we have here a head. This is the object that we're going to be using to clone this spline shape onto. This is a knitting pattern that I found on the internet. At the time, I was looking for 3D knitting effects, so I was playing around with a bunch of like this sort of like shapes, but it doesn't necessarily need to be this one in particular. But in this case, I'm just gonna go ahead and use it. So the first thing I want to do is I'm gonna hide this head for now, and while holding the spline shape here, I'm gonna go to Mograph and then holding Alt, I'm gonna let go of my cloner so that I can create it and that it can be already established as a as the father of this hierarchy. So I'm gonna change the mode here from linear to object, and then I'm gonna drag and drop here the head that we have, and then we're gonna change the distribution to polygon center, and the up vector is gonna be -y. I'm going to change the transformation to -90 so that all these corners are going to be looking up. Cool. So now we have the basic setup. Now we just need to add some effectors and get this party going. So I'm going to go here to effectors, and up here I'm going to see how this is highlighted. I'm going to click on it so that I can undock this window and have all these effectors handy. The first effector I'm going to use is going to be a plane effector that is going to be controlling the scale. So I'm just going to rename it S for scale, and uncheck the position, enable scale, uniform scale, -1 here. So basically this will be used as a reveal. And on to my planar effector here on the file left, I'm going to create a linear field. Oops. And right now this linear field is a bit too big, so I'm going to scale it down. And notice how I'm selecting and clicking here on the S so I can highlight all the 3 axes.
and then I'm gonna type here 0.2, and before I press enter, I'm gonna hold control and then press enter. That way all the highlighted parameters will be affected with the same value that I put in here. I'm gonna change, oh, first of all, I'm gonna get this guy out of that hierarchy. I'm gonna put him here at the top, move this body here at the bottom, and I'm gonna rename this linear field to CTRL underscore main. This is the main control. I'm going to change the direction from positive X to positive Y. That way the build will happen from the bottom up. Okay. And we're going to create a couple of keyframes. One here when it's all the way down. Come here. Click here to create a keyframe. Go to 60 frames. Go all the way up and then click it again. Next, right now it has this green color, and that is because of the it's because of this effector here that is applying the color. So I'm gonna uncheck here the color coming from the field so that it's not distracting, and I'm gonna hide my field. Okay, so right now if I scrub through the time, you can see this. I'm also going to adjust my timeline to something like 100 frames. Okay. Next, I'm going to go ahead and create our second effector. Will be another plane. This time it's going to be affecting the rotation and scale. So on the parameters, I'm going to uncheck the position here and enable scale and rotation. The pitch for the rotation will be 90, and the scale on the Z will be maybe 30. If I scrub through the time, I'm gonna go to my file of here and then drag and drop the linear field. And once again, the green came back, but now you have this mystic effect, reveal effect that is happening. And this is pretty much the basic setup of that effect. I'm gonna uncheck here the color. I'm gonna turn it off, and to finalize the basic setup here for our system is that I'm gonna break the uniformity by creating a random effector, and just make sure that the cloner is selected so that you don't have to like drag and drop here onto your effectors. So I'm gonna create here my random effector, put it here at the top, rename it S, because it's gonna be breaking the scale. Here I'm gonna be changing the parameters to 1.5 maybe here on Z, and you can see right now it's affecting everything, all the cloners on my scene. So on my file of tab, I'm gonna drag and drop the linear field that I was using before, and you can see now how that uniformity is no longer there anymore. Now we have this a little bit more of an organic look. Now, what I like to do once I have this set, like this basic, like the first phase of this effector, like the base of this whole animation, is to now go into each individual effector and create a curve modifier. If you click here and hold, you have all these modifiers available for you. So in this case, we're going to be using a curve modifier to remap the influence from this linear field onto this effector. So I'm going to select these 2 points here, and I'm going to hold Alt E. Okay, and that's going to flatten these tangents. And in this particular case, I'm going to create here an extra point, Alt E again to flatten that. And I'm going to move my points around here, something like this. And you can see if you go through like the middle of your animation and start moving these points around, you can see the effect that is causing this. See that? Okay, so again, this is going to be the time for you to play around and find the parameters that that are going to work for you. And I'm going to do the same thing with this planar effector here too. Hold, select these 2 points, press Alt E, and this one I'm gonna move it all the way to the left. Maybe should move it all the way to the right. There we go, so that that animation can happen a little faster. Okay, maybe not that fast. And increase this guy so that it can have a better ease. So let's see. Perfect, let's play it. Cool. So let's say you're already happy with the animation that you have. You already did the previews that you wanted to do, and you know this animation is looking good. You can, on top of this, you can always finalize your animations with a delay effector. It's always nice to have that extra smoothness in your scene. So I'm going to change the strength to probably something like 75. And before calling this project done, I'm going to select this cloner and duplicate it, just so that we can have more cloners here. So I'm going to change the distribution to vertex. And you see that now we have more cloners, but they're all keeping the same pattern, you know, that organized pattern that we were working with before. The reason why I like to do it this way is because otherwise the other way for you to control the amount of cloners that you have in your scene will be to add more subdivisions, but this can increase exponentially and like go out of hand very easily. So if there is a combination between, you know, how much the subdivision of your object is going to have in the first place before you start adding these cloners, you know, you want to have something medium, and then, you know, if you want to add more cloners, then you have this second option, you know, to duplicate this cloner and then change the distribution. So ultimately, all we need to do now is just export this. But before we export it, we need to create and connect object, and then drop these 2 connectors here under this object, and then uncheck here the weld. Otherwise, you're going to have, I don't know how many cloners we have here, but probably more than 1,000 cloners. So you're going to have 1,000 shape objects, you know, that you're going to have to deal with. Now this connect, what's going to do, it's going to merge all those splines into one single spline object, that it will be easier, you know, to add materials, effects, tags, whatever you want to add on top of that. So while selecting this connect object, I'm going to go to my file, export Alembic, go ahead and save it. Make sure that the end frame matches my timeline, or at least, you know, the animation that you have in there. Subframes, it's important if you want to do slow motion animation. Like if you're gonna bring this Alembic back and retime it, this is a good parameter so that you can, I don't know, add 15 subframes in between frames, so that the animation or the interpolation between frame and frame will be smoother, and you're not gonna have this chopped stepped effect. But just just keep in mind that, like, if you increase this too much, it's gonna take longer, of course. So the second parameter that I like to keep an eye on is this guy, selection only. If I don't have it checked, it's gonna export my entire scene. And right now I don't want that. You might want that, you might not, but in this case, all I want to do is export this connect object. Splines, because we're working with splines, and I want this connect object to become just one single spline. Everything else should remain default for me, I mean, in this particular case. So I'm gonna go ahead and press OK, but I'm gonna bring back a Alembic that I already baked before. So let me uncheck all this and then hide these guys. Turn off all my effectors here, and then holding Control-Shift-O, I'm gonna bring this Alembic now, making sure that this frame rate matches my project. And as you can see here, if I bring this connect down here, this is one shape with the spline icon here, so meaning this is a spline object, and I have the structure that I have, you know, within my connect. So right now you don't need any of this cloner, so you can delete that and just keep this spline object. And if I scrub through my timeline, you can see So cool. Another reason why I like to do this is because the layout's already baked in it. Now I can scrub through the time, and if I needed to art direct this, you can still take this a step further and add more modifiers on top of it. So let me show you. If I go here to my bend modifier, like all these different modifiers that you have here, some of them will affect shape, some of them will affect splines only. In this case, I'm gonna use a displacer, which will work perfectly for us. So let's say I want to break the uniformity even more, right? Let's say that I can still see some sort of like uniformity going on here at the top or whatever, and I want to change that. I want to art direct that. So I'm gonna go to my displacer here, shading, shader, noise, and you can see that first of all it is affecting it. So that's the main thing, that you can still edit this after the fact. I'm gonna go back to my object, change this to maybe 5, and then change instead of vertex normal to planar. Because this is a build-up effect coming from the bottom up, I'm gonna change it to Y. And I'm also gonna be using here my file of the same linear field that I was using before. And this is gonna work perfectly just because I brought this limbic back into the same scene. So the timing and everything else should be the same. And as before, I'm going to create a curve modifier, adjust the curves, and scrub through the time here to see what we have. I'm going to create another shape like that. And you can see what's happening. Again, this is the time for you to play around with this shape here and get the results that you're looking for. Okay, maybe I'm just gonna leave it as default. So once you're ready to go, and this is, you're already happy with the animation, you can select the connect here one more time and export as an limbic, and then you can share this with whoever else is going to be doing the texturing, lighting. That way you can keep one limbic file. And in case that there is any changes, you can just replace that Olympic file with the new update. And that's it. Let me show you one more time the final result. Here, let's go back here to my Instagram. And there you go. You can see it was a very easy effect just using cloners and effectors. So let's move on to our second project. So here on our second project, this was a personal project. This was a test that I was trying to achieve an automated animation, something that can be controlled just with expressions. In this case, noise notes within Espresso, so that in case I needed to extend the animation or not, I wouldn't have to worry about keyframes, since all this is just being driven by a noise node. I'm going to be talking about post-morph tags, Espresso a little bit, and how I did this whole setup. So let's go into Cinema 4D and let me show you how simple this setup is. I have here already 3 heads. This is our main head, and these 2 other duplicates they're kind of hard to see, but they have been modified with certain expressions. So I'm going to be using these 2 targets, these 2 expressions to drive, like the post-morph onto this head, the main head that we have here. Let me show you. That might be a little bit confusing, but promise you it's not. So let's go ahead and create our post-morph if I can find it. Post-morph, there you are. Perfect. Now, in other applications, this could be called blend shapes, like in Maya. But the post-morph in Cinema 4D, it's very powerful, and I love it. It doesn't just storage the deformation of the mesh. It can also storage the deformation of, like your position, your scale, your rotation, all those parameters can be recorded and stored, and all of them will be just there with a slider control that you can just activate and animate. In this case, I'm going to be using points. Now, when you first create your pose morph and select points, you will have a base pose here already created, and basically that's telling you, okay, now it's time for you to edit. So you can change your mode to point, for instance, and do any changes that you want. Let's do the rock. It's kind of weird looking rock, but for those who used to watch WWE, you remember this ish. I don't know. It's kind of an ugly one, but you can see that this will be recorded there. In this case, I'm not going to be using this. I'm going to be using the external heads that I created. And this is important, guys. This head, like this duplicates, they need to have the exact same poly count and this one and the same order. Otherwise, this will not work. So let me hide these two guys here and click and drag our first target. Just press yes, second target, and yes. And if I come here to my animate mode, you can see here my two poses are created. So one is this expression, and the other one is just the eyebrows moving up and down. Okay. Now all that's left is just to create a expresso tag here, so that we can connect those parameters. So I'm going to click here on the corner, and I'm going to drag it here to the side so I can dock this window there. And for this setup, we're going to be using three major nodes. One of them, which is the most important, will be the noise node, which will be the one driving the whole animation. A range mapper, so that we can control the strength of those values, and a clamp, so that we can keep things under control. Now, all this, it's going to be connected to this pose morph tag. So I can just click and drag it here onto my Expresso editor. And there's a couple of ways for you to create the input. Here you can just click here on the blue for the input, and then look for the parameter that you want to control. Or the way that I like to do it, it's just click here the value that you want to control and just drop it onto the blue or the red, depending if it's the input or the output. Okay, so that will be my first parameter, and then I'm going to select here my second parameter. One more node that I like to use when I'm working with Express is the result node. I just like to see the values here sometimes, so I don't have to, constantly come back here and be like, oh, this is affecting 100%. Oh, it's going to negative. Sometimes I just like to see it here, but it's entirely up to you. So let's get started. Let's start to connect these nodes together. So the noise to the input of the range mapper, and then the output to the value of this clamp. This clamp will be connected here to the result. And when I'm working with noises, ideally I like to see the sort of like the F curve right through the timeline. But I have this playing around with this project. I started to use a null here. Where's my null? A null and a tracer to simulate the curve of my timeline, and controlling the Y position of my curve to have a representation of what this noise is doing. So in order for us to create that, let's create here a tracer, and I had this null selected so that the null can be already inside this box right here. And all I want to do is now connect this null here. I want to connect the Y position of my null, of course, here on my input, and this will be controlled by this clamp, this noise. So if I press play right now, nothing's happening because right now it's in the middle of the scene. So what you have to do is just basically animate this on X from one side, let's say, to another, and then we already have a shortcut for this. It's Alt key for me. It's to show my F tracks, and then tab to go to my F curves, and then selecting these two keyframes. I'm going to change it to linear interpolation, and then on my freeze transformation here of the null, I'm going to move it up so I can have this representation above my head. And if I press play, you can see there's a line right now. It's pretty much flat, but I promise you there are values there. So I'm going to change the color of this line so that we can see it easier. It can be a little more visible. Okay, perfect. So now let's go ahead and start changing the values here of the noise. So as you start modifying the values of the noise, you're going to start seeing these different reactions on the curve. So let's see. Is it even affecting it? Something's not right. Oh, right now my clamp is literally clamping everything flat. So I want to change the minimum to -1 and then the max to 1. And then if I press play again, and we can see, there we go, start seeing those ups and downs. That amplitude is now taking effect. So going back to my noise, let's play around more with these parameters here. You can see those now, that representation of my noise. So I'm going to change this to have something more accurate. And again, you can play around with this and go crazy and really achieve the look you're going for. Okay, so if I were to connect now this guy here, you can see that those expressions are reacting the same way that this plane is reacting, at least timing wise. Because there are expressions you want to have something a little bit more subtle, so I'm going to decrease the frequency here, maybe to 3 again. There we go, something more subtle. And that's it. This is the basic setup. Once you have this in place with the right like timing and speed, all you have to do is just duplicate this whole system, holding control and then dragging it to the bottom so that you can duplicate the whole thing, and then connecting it to the second parameter here, the second pose. Now, because this is controlled by a noise, we can change the seat, so we can offset the time a little more. And right now they're going way too much. If I were to go to my pose mode, they're probably going to negative. Yeah, they're going from -100 to 100. So this is where your clamp can start coming into play, and maybe with something like 0.5, and maybe they're still too big. So something else you can do is here, maybe change the output to 5, and then maybe this guy too. So in essence, all I'm looking for is to have a more subtle deformation in the face, and NA to like get rid of that wireframe look, and just see what we have right now. And cool. So after playing around with the settings here of the noise, let me show you the final result in my scene. So excuse me, using this one. So I didn't stick to just 2 targets. I had actually multiple targets, and that way I was able to have more control. But again, the main goal of this project was to come up with a system that will allow me to extend the timeline and extend the time in general of this animation without having to worry about keyframes. once this is already in place, you can change the timeline here to, like, I don't know, 1,000 frames, 20,000, whatever you want. You don't have to worry about keyframes. This is already ready to render. And as you can see, all of them are being driven by the noise. And, all I was doing just going through the parameters and changing, so that I can just add a little more variation through the expressions. And if I go here to my post-morph tab, you can see all these parameters being driven by that. And this part up here, so this is only for the post-morph. All it is up here is just a simple setup that I created to, like, control the eyes so that it can have some deformations here on the eyelids when they're, like, moving. And then this is just controlling the rotation of the neck using this vibrate tags. So if I were to increase this to something like 30, probably will be more noticeable. There we go. And like I said, you see, this is the timeline. You can go, crazy with it, and you don't have to worry about keyframes. So cool. Let me show you one more time the end result. Again, this was created just with Espresso and post-morph tags, just to achieve this. I don't want to say looping animation, but it's an automated animation that can be extended to whatever the time that you need it to be. Excuse me. So with this, we conclude our second project. So let's go ahead and jump onto our final project here. So here on our final project, I have this effect, this animation of textures that are being, this animation is being driven by a vertex map that is controlling the mixing effect between this rock material and this iridescent material. So again, this was created with vertex maps, and the animation was driven using fields. So let's go to Cinema 4D and let me show you. Again, it's a simple setup. So here I already have this scan of a woman here in place that I took from the content browser. If you just go and look for woman, is this one over here. You can use any of them. And the first thing I want to do is create my vertex map. So I'm going to go to either one of these modes here, either point, edge, or polygon modes, and then just holding V, I'm going to go to select, set vertex weight, and then let go. In this case, it doesn't matter because we're going to control the value with fields. So I'm going to here enable use fields, delete this freeze, and create one more time a linear field. At this point, I can go back to my object mode here. So here at the top on my linear field, I'm going to change the orientation. So instead of the direction right now is on positive X, I'm going to change it to something like positive Y. And then here you have these dots that you can adjust the height of it or the length. Again, I'm going to scale this down, and like I did before, I'm going to click here on the edge so that all these axes can be selected. Double click it and change the value to 0.2, and then before pressing enter, I'm going to hold control and then enter so that all the axes can be affected by it. And all I'm going to do now is go ahead and create a keyframe. So go up here with 60 and then move it all the way to the bottom, and then keyframe again. I'm going to go to my curves. I already have again my shortcut Alt Q to show my tracks here. So what I want to do is tap here so I can go to my F curve and then change the interpolation to linear, which recently I found out that there's L. Yeah, L is the shortcut to change that to linear, which I did not know. So if you guys didn't know, now you guys know. So let me hide this linear field, and let's go ahead. Click here on the vertex map tag so that you can see the influence and what's happening. And this is pretty much it. Whatever is yellow will be affected. It will have the value of 1. So basically that will become white, and whatever is red, that's the black. So this will be your mat that you will use in order for you to drive the two materials. Like in the beginning, this is way too uniform, and I want to break that uniformity by bringing some noise. So in this case, I'm going to use a shader field, and I'm going to change the shader to a noise. You can see right now it's affecting the whole thing. So I want to change this max blending mode to overlay so that it will only be affecting here on the gradient area. And I'm going to change my noise to this electric option here, and I'm going to increase this global value here. And again, this is the time for you to play around with the values. You know, play it a couple times, make sure that this is something that you like. You can even animate this guy. Let's put something wild so that we can really see this thing in action. And you see it's like a little bit more of an organic simulation going there. Next, once you're happy with the animation of your vertex map, the next thing will be to create a material. So for this, we're going to create 2 Redshift materials. We're going to name, we're going to name the first one 1. I'm going to holding control. I'm going to click and drag it to the right so I can create 2 more materials. This is going to be 2. This is going to be 3. Actually, this is going to be the mix. So I'm going to double click this material, and I'm going to bring here my shader graph. Now, there is a website that I like to go to get free textures all the time, and it's this cc0textures.com. They have a huge library of PBR materials already ready to use. It's a great website. They're all free. We come here to the main page. You can read about the licensing and all that stuff. So for this example, I took this rock material, and as you can see, it was created using Substance Painter here. We have some variations here. So I already went ahead and downloaded this material, and I'm gonna bring the color, normal, and roughness here to my shader graph. So I'm gonna put this here to the side a little bit. And for our color, our first node here, I'm gonna create a color correct. And then I'm gonna connect the output color into the input, and then this output color here from the correct into my diffuse color. The reason why I like to connect this into a color correct node is that in case I need to like change the saturation or anything else while I'm looking at it in the IPR, I already have these controls handy. Before we move on, I like to right click on the name and go to ports, remove unused ports, and then holding control, double click on the name. That way it's nice and neat. You're not seeing ports that you're not going to use. Okay, and then moving on to our second node here, this roughness. Now this roughness texture, it's a black and white texture. When I'm working with black and white textures, I like to create ramps. Now these ramps are going to be used as a curve modifier in essence. I'm going to be connecting this roughness directly to my roughness here. And you can see in the preview here, it's already acting. And now if I were to modify these guys, these dots here, these colors, this ramp, you can see here on my preview how this is being affected. So this is an easy way to control the values of your kind of grayscale texture there. So I'm gonna leave it by default for now. And then for at last here, my normal map, when I'm working with normal maps, I like to override the gamma and just leave it at 1. And for this, we're gonna need a bump map. Now this bump map by default is gonna be set to height fill, which needs a black and white image. But in this case, because we're working with normals, we're gonna be using a tangent space normal. And now we can connect this guy here to the input, look for texture input, and then the output of this node will be connected to the overall bump input. Okay, now with this material, I can go ahead and connect it to the output. Now I'm not gonna start the IPR yet. I'm gonna create the second material first, and then once we're ready with the whole setup, we're gonna be coming back here and then start tweaking these values more. So on the second material, we have that iridescent material, and it's actually a very easy, simple material to create. It's just based on a Fresnel, and then because a Fresnel will give us a black and white image, I'm going to be using a ramp to control that, and then I'm going to use another ramp to map the black and white values with color. So if I extend this here by clicking on the arrow, you can load these preset colors that Cinema 4D already comes with. In this case, I'm going to be using Rainbow 1. Okay, and let's go ahead and connect these dots here. So output of the Fresnel will go into the first ramp, the second ramp will go into the third. The first ramp will go into the second ramp, and then this final ramp will go into the color of the reflection. Okay, so we need a little more space here. Perfect. So the first thing on the Fresnel, what I want to do is change the use index of refraction. I want to turn that off, and I want to, because I was already playing with it, I know that for me the value that I want to use is 1.5, but again, can go and see what this is doing. So if I connect this Fresnel to the output, you can see exactly what's happening when you increase this value or not. So, okay, so I'm going to leave it like that. I'm going to connect my material once again to the output, and I'm going to change the weight color here to 0. And then you can start seeing here some colors coming through, the greens and this purples, but they're still a little bit too dark in my opinion. So I'm going to increase the IR here to probably 15. You can see those colors are coming through. Now, the cool thing is that because this is driven by a ramp, now you can control those colors with that initial ramp, as you can see. Okay, so I'm going to leave it as default right now. Now, for our final material here, oops, I should have closed that. So now we have this final mix material. So we're going to be referencing these two materials. So just click and drag the first one, drop it in here, and you see ref 1. And the same one for the next one, ref 2. And now we're going to mix these two materials, and we're going to set Shift C. Sorry for not mentioning this before, but Shift C will give you this window, and then in here you can search the materials that you're going to be using. In this case, I'm going to be using this node called Material Blender. I'm going to connect material 1 to the base material, material 2 to our layer 1 color. Now I'm going to connect this material blender to the output, but not yet. What I want to do is I want to create, again, Shift C, a vertex map node. So Cinema 4D vertex map, and now we can bring that vertex map that we created so that it can control the blending of these two materials. I'm going to connect the output into the material blender onto layer blender color 1. I'm going to click and move this port right there in the middle so that visually it will make sense. And now I'm going to connect this guy onto my output. Now it's a good time to start my IPR and start seeing what we have. What are we working with? So what I want to do is press play. Nothing's happening. You see there's no materials right now. I'm going to bring the mixed material, apply it to the female. And automatically says it looks dark here. So because it's reflecting all the environment, and the environment right now is black, there's nothing going on. So we're going to create a dome light here. and I'm gonna turn off my post effects. And I'll recommend you guys go ahead and play with this post effects. They're so cool to use. They're so easy to use too. But for this dumb light, what I want to do is go to my content browser, and I'm gonna look for an HDRI. Okay, and then I'm gonna press enter, and then maybe this one will do. So I'm gonna go to my general and then click and drag this HDRI here into my path. And then I want to disable this enable background. I don't want to see, I just want to see, I just want to use the HDR for the lighting purposes. So I'm going to increase this to maybe 5, that's too much, 3. There we go. And then you can rotate this maybe just to find the lighting that you're looking for. I'm not going to go too crazy for this, but it's going to leave it as it was. So that's it. As you can see, the material is working, the blending is working, the vertex map is doing what it's supposed to be doing. You're ready to render, but you need some AOVs. It's always good to have AOVs so that you can have extra control in Photoshop or whatever composite software that you're using later. So in order for us to create these AOVs, I'm gonna create 2 custom AOVs. One that will be the matte for these 2 materials. So in essence, it's just this vertex map directly here. So if I connect this guy to the output, it will be this. Okay, so let's go ahead and create that. So let's Shift C, AOV, and because we're working with colors, we're going to set storage color to AOV. Double click it. Now I'm going to connect this material blender here into the input, into the beauty input, and then I'm going to connect it here to the output. Now I'm going to bring this vertex map that I created into the input 0. And now we can create our custom AOV, and we can call it this matte 01. Now I want to create 1 second custom material out of this vertex map. I'm going to show you exactly what I'm going to do. I'm going to create an outline for this effect so that we can bring that in After Effects and add it on top of it so that we can have like a glow around it as this mix effect is happening. So in order for us to create that, all we need to do is just remap that something like this, white in the middle. And if we were to preview this on the output, you see you're gonna get this outline. And if I scrub through the time, basically that outline is it's gonna go through the animation with the animation of the vertex map that you already have in place. So we're gonna connect this to this AOV nodes here that we have here. In this case, now we'll be onto the second one, which in this case is input 1. And now we can connect this AOV back to where it was. And again, one more time, add a new custom AOV and name it matte02. You can close this window now. And if I come here to my passes here, you can see that I have my beauty pass, I have my matte, and I have my matte02. So with all these passes already set, you can close this window. Make sure that you have the path that you want to save these guys onto. And whenever you're ready to render, just go ahead and render. You have already your AOVs in place. And let me show you how that looks in After Effects. So once you bring that, I already brought them into After Effects. And I have my beauty, and I have my first matte. And then I have my outline here. Okay. So it was very easy for me to use them. In order for me to just control this glow, all I had to do was just bring that outline matte and change here the matte to Luma matte, and that's it. You have the extra control here to change the colors, tint it. I'm also using the main matte that we use, so in essence the vertex matte, to kind of control, independently the rock texture to this iridescent material here on the top. One last thing that I want to tell you guys is that this doesn't stop there. This vertex map is so powerful. Once this is in place, this can be used as a field to control anything. So if I were to control here a displacer, for instance, I'm going to create a displacer, put it here under as a child. And for this case, I'm just going to change this to color. See, right now it's being affected to everything, right? It's affecting everything because there is no follow. So I'm going to click and drag this vertex map onto the box here. And now you can see that the vertex map is driving the animation of that displacer. Okay. And the last tip that I want to share with you guys is that something that I run into when I was playing around with vertex maps was like, in order for you to get a good vertex map resolution, you need a lot of vertices. I didn't run into that issue because this female scan has, to start with, has a lot of subdivision, so I really have a nice gradient. But let me show you what happens when you don't. So I'm gonna change this to something like icosahedron, if that's how you say it. I'm not so sure. I'm gonna press C, and then I'm gonna go to my points mode here, and then same thing, same way. I'm gonna create here a set vertex weight. And the beauty of using fields is that you can just borrow the fields that we already had in place. So in this case, for instance, this one. So let's go to, I'm gonna just duplicate this material and apply it to my sphere. Double click on the material, and all I wanna see is, as a matter of fact, I should duplicate this guy. And all I wanna see is this guy. I'll put it here. I'm gonna change the name just so that there is no issues to 1 here on the vertex map, and then I'm gonna drag and drop this guy here. And all I want to do is just preview this vertex map, and you guys are gonna see it right now. I don't have too many subdivisions in this sphere. So if I go here to my render view and start. Okay, you see here how like the resolution matters. So that was something that like I was struggling, because like there were certain models or certain occasions in which I didn't want to add more subdivisions to my model in order for me to do that. So something that I just run into was to just overwrite the tessellation of the object, and you guys can see like immediately you have that soft edge again. Now that was one application that I found. I'm sharing this with you because like I'm hoping that this will be useful information and it could be used in different ways. I personally haven't found any other ways to use this. I'm pretty sure you can use them maybe like adding more like noise patterns and stuff like that, in your shaders. But there you go guys, that's the last tip. Thank you so much for staying all the way here with me. The chainsaw is no longer with us. For those of you who remember the chainsaw, this is a second video for you guys. Again, Cinema for the Community has always been there to support and to share all this knowledge. So this is a small contribution for my part, hoping that this can be useful for any of you guys. Do follow me. I wanna say something because of that. I created this Instagram initially to keep track of like some of my personal projects, but because of you guys and receiving all the support that I've been receiving, I got super excited, and then I started to like create different projects. This personal project called Once, it's coming up, and for all of you that have been supporting me, I want to do a thank you project, thank you gift in return for the love. I'm gonna be giving away this camera rig that I model. I'm gonna be giving you all the Cinema 4D files, the rig, the model, the textures, all that the Redshift, it was built in Redshift, so I'm going to be giving you the Redshift materials as well. So yeah, that was it for my presentation. Thank you so much for staying with me. Thank you, Maxon. Thank you, Matthias. And until the next one.